My daughter sent a text that was supposed to end my involvement in our family vacation, but instead, it ended her entire lifestyle. "Dad, you are banned from our Italian vacation. Emma says family only." She sent this after I had just spent $130,000 renovating their kitchen and digging their new pool. I did not cry and I did not beg. I simply picked up the phone, canceled every single flight, and put the house they were living in on the market. But that was just the beginning of the nightmare I was about to unleash on them. Before I tell you how I destroyed my ungrateful daughter's world, please like and subscribe if you believe respect goes both ways. My name is Lawrence Bennett. I am 73 years old, a retired structural engineer, and I have spent my entire life calculating load-bearing capacities. I know exactly how much weight a beam can hold before it snaps, and I know exactly how much pressure a foundation can take before it collapses. For 40 years, I built skyscrapers in Chicago and New York. I dealt with corrupt unions, lazy contractors, and shifting soil. I learned that you do not fix a structural failure with paint. You fix it by tearing it down and starting over. I was standing in my bedroom in the quiet suburbs of Connecticut. My vintage leather suitcase was open on the bed. I was packing with the same precision I used to apply to my blueprints. 3 linen shirts folded perfectly, my blood pressure medication in the side pocket, the travel adapter, and most importantly, the small velvet box containing the photo of my late wife, Catherine. This trip to Tuscany was supposed to be our 50th anniversary celebration. Catherine had always wanted to rent a villa in the hills near Florence to drink wine and watch the sunset. She died 4 years ago, but I was determined to keep that promise. I had rented the villa for the entire month. I had paid for 4 business-class tickets on Global Airlines. One for me, one for my daughter Madison, one for her husband Todd, and one for my 19-year-old granddaughter Emma. The cost was astronomical, but I did not care. I have done well for myself. My investments are solid, and my pension is generous. I wanted to give them the world because I thought that is what fathers do. I was just closing the brass latches on the suitcase when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a notification from Madison. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling that familiar ache in my knees, and picked up the phone expecting a message about airport transfers, or maybe a request to bring extra luggage allowance. I put on my reading glasses and opened the message. It was long. Madison never sent long texts unless she was trying to justify something terrible. The text read, "Hi Dad, look, Todd and I have been talking with Emma, and we need to set some healthy boundaries for this trip. Emma is in a delicate place right now with her mental health, and she feels that having 3 generations under one roof might be too much pressure. She really wants this to be a nuclear family bonding experience, just her and her parents. We think it is best if you sit this one out. We will FaceTime you from the villa and send tons of photos, I promise. We can do a separate dinner when we get back to the States. Love you, mean it." I read the message twice. Then I read it a third time. I did not feel sadness. I did not feel the sting of rejection. What I felt was the cold, hard click of a switch flipping in my brain. It was the same feeling I used to get when I walked onto a construction site and saw that a contractor had used substandard steel. It was the realization that the structure was unsound. Nuclear family. That was the phrase that stuck in my throat. A nuclear family that I was financing. A nuclear family that lived in a house I bought. A nuclear family that drove cars I paid the insurance on. I stood up and walked over to my desk. I opened the top drawer and pulled out my checkbook ledger. I am an old-fashioned man. I keep records of everything. I ran my finger down the list of recent expenses. Just last Tuesday, I had signed a check for $130,000 to Miller Construction. That was for the chef-is kitchen. Madison demanded with the marble waterfall island and the sub-zero fridge. It also covered the excavation for the heated saltwater pool Todd insisted was necessary for his back problems. $130,000. They had waited. They had calculated this perfectly. They waited until the check cleared, until the work began. And then they cut me out. They wanted the villa I paid for, the flights I bought, and the house I renovated, but they did not want me. I was just the wallet. I was the silent partner in their life of luxury. I looked at the photo of Catherine on the dresser. She was smiling, that soft smile that used to calm my temper. She would have made excuses for them. She would have said, "Larry, they are just young, let them have their time." But Catherine was gone, and with her went the buffer that protected them from my reality. I am a structural engineer. When a load-bearing wall is compromised, you do not paint over it. You remove the load. I sat down in my leather armchair and picked up my phone. I did not text Madison back. I did not call her to argue. I did not ask for an explanation. I dialed the priority number for Global Airlines. "Good afternoon, Mr. Bennett. How can I help you?" the agent asked. I spoke calmly. "I need to make a change to my upcoming itinerary for the flight to Rome tomorrow." "Certainly, sir. What would you like to change?" "I need to cancel the tickets for Madison Bennett, Todd Reynolds, and Emma Reynolds." The agent paused. "All three of them, sir. Are you canceling the entire trip?" "No," I said. "Keep the ticket for Lawrence Bennett. Just cancel the other three. And please ensure the refund is processed to the original form of payment, which is my American Express Centurion card. Do not issue travel credits to the passengers. Full refund to the purchaser." "Done, sir. The cancellation emails have been sent." "Thank you." I hung up. That was roughly $30,000 back in my pocket. But I was not done. The anger in my chest was cold and heavy. It was not burning, it was freezing. I scrolled through my contacts and found the number for Mike, the owner of Miller Construction. He was a good man, an honest contractor who had been working on Madison's house for the last week. Mike answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mr. Bennett, we are making great progress over here. The crew just finished digging the hole for the pool, and we are about to pour the concrete foundation for the outdoor kitchen." "Mike, stop working," I said. There was a silence on the line. "I am sorry, Mr. Bennett. What did you say?" "I said stop working immediately. Tell your crew to put down their tools." "Is everything okay, sir? Did we hit a pipe?" "No, Mike, everything is not okay. I want you to take the excavator you have in the backyard, and I want you to fill the hole back in." I could hear the confusion in his voice. "Sir, I do not understand. You want us to fill the pool hole? We just spent 3 days digging it. The rebar is already ordered." "I know, Mike. I am paying you for the time. Keep the deposit. Keep the materials fee. But I want you to fill that hole with dirt right now. Push all the dirt back in. Pack it down. And then I want you to tear out the new cabinets you installed in the kitchen yesterday. Mr. Bennett, this is going to make a mess. Madison is going to flip out. She is getting ready for her trip. She is practically vibrating with excitement about this kitchen." "Madison is not going on a trip," I said, my voice flat. "And Madison does not own that house, Mike. I do. The deed is in the name of the Bennett Revocable Trust. I am the sole trustee. You work for me. Now fill in the hole." I heard Mike take a deep breath. He knew better than to argue with me when I used my job site voice. "Okay, boss. You write the checks. We will start filling it in now." I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at my own manicured lawn. I poured myself a glass of Scotch neat. My hand was steady. My phone buzzed again. It was a notification from my banking app. Refund processed, Global Airlines. $32,000. Then it buzzed again, and again. It was Madison. "Dad. Dad, are you there? Dad. I just got a weird email from the airline. It says our tickets are canceled." "Dad, pick up the phone." I took a sip of the scotch. It tasted like oak and smoke. I watched the screen light up with her panic. She was realizing that the ATM she called a father had just shut down. For years, I had let this happen. I had let Todd borrow money for business ventures that never launched. I had paid for Emma's private school tuition because Todd said the public schools were not good enough for her creative spirit. I had bought that 4-bedroom colonial house in the best school district and let them live there rent-free because I wanted my granddaughter to have a yard. I had created monsters. I had insulated them from the consequences of their mediocrity. And now they thought they could discard me like an old rapper. The phone rang. It was Todd. I sent the call to voicemail. Then Emma called. My sweet granddaughter who needed space for her mental health. I sent her to voicemail too. I was not going to argue with them. I was not going to give them the satisfaction of a fight. I was going to show them what the world looks like when you have to pay for your own arrogance. I finished my drink and checked my watch. It was 2 p.m. They were supposed to leave for the airport at 5 p.m. They were probably staring at their suitcases right now, wondering what was happening. I walked back to my suitcase. I checked my passport. I checked my euros. I was ready. But there was one more thing I needed to do before I left for the airport. I needed to see the look on their faces. I needed to see the moment they realized that the Bank of Lawrence was permanently closed. I grabbed my car keys and headed for the door. I was going to drive over to the house I owned, the house they lived in, and I was going to watch my contractor fill their dream pool with dirt. I got into my Ford F-150 truck. It was 10 years old. Madison always told me to buy a Lexus or a Mercedes, something that fit the family image. She hated that I drove a truck. She said it embarrassed her when I parked in her driveway. Well, she was going to be very embarrassed today. As I drove toward their subdivision, my phone kept vibrating on the passenger seat. Texts, calls, voicemails. They were frantic. They were confused. They were probably furious. I turned onto their street. It was a cul-de-sac of large expensive homes with manicured lawns and 3-car garages. I saw my truck reflected in the windows of the neighbors' houses. I pulled up to the house. The scene was chaotic. Mike's crew was in the front yard hauling pieces of high-end kitchen cabinetry out the front door and stacking them on the lawn. The sound of heavy machinery came from the backyard. I parked the truck right in the middle of the driveway, blocking Todd's leased BMW. I stepped out of the truck and adjusted my blazer. I saw the front door fly open. Madison came running out. Her hair was half done, she was wearing a silk robe, and she looked like she was on the verge of a stroke. "Dad!" she screamed. "Dad, what the hell is going on? Mike's guys are tearing out the kitchen. They are destroying the backyard." "Stop them." Todd appeared behind her, holding his phone, looking pale. "Larry, the airline says you canceled the tickets. Tell me this is a mistake. Tell me you got hacked." I leaned against the side of my truck and crossed my arms. I looked at them. Really looked at them. A 40-year-old woman and a 42-year-old man who had never paid a mortgage payment in their lives. "It is not a mistake," I said calmly. Emma came out of the house, then holding her phone, recording me. "Grandpa, are you having a senile episode? This is abuse. I am putting this on TikTok." I looked at my granddaughter. The girl who needed space from me. "You wanted a nuclear family trip," I said, my voice carrying clearly over the sound of the excavator in the backyard. "You wanted to be independent. You wanted boundaries. Well, here are your boundaries. I am not part of your nuclear family, so my money is not part of it either." "Dad, stop this!" Madison yelled, grabbing my arm. "You are ruining everything. We have reservations. We have plans." "You have nothing," I said, shaking her hand. "You have no tickets. You have no pool. You have no kitchen. And as of tomorrow, you will not have a house." Todd stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. "Now hold on, Larry. You can't just come here and destroy our property. This is our home. We have rights." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "Your property, Todd. You think this is your property? I bought this house. I pay the taxes. I pay the insurance. You are guests, and you have just overstayed your welcome. I signaled to Mike, who was standing on the porch looking uncomfortable. Keep going, Mike. Fill it all in. The sound of the excavator engine roared as it dumped a load of heavy clay soil into the hole where their infinity pool was supposed to be. Madison screamed. It was a primal sound of entitlement being crushed. I got back in my truck. I rolled down the window. I am going to Italy, I said. I am going to drink wine on the terrace and toast to my wife. You three can enjoy your staycation. I suggest you start looking for apartments. I hear the market is tough right now. I put the truck in reverse and backed out of the driveway, leaving them standing on the lawn amidst the debris of their unearned life. But as I drove away, I knew this was not the end. They would not give up that easily. They would come after me. They would try to use the law, they would try to use guilt, and they would try to use public perception. They had no idea that I had already called my lawyer Wallace. They had no idea that I was about to cut every single financial cord that held their pathetic lives together. I turned on the radio and hummed along to a Sinatra song. The vacation had not even started yet, and I was already having a wonderful time. But the real war was just beginning. I pulled my 10-year-old Ford F-150 up to the curb, the engine rumbling a low growl that seemed out of place amongst the gleaming Range Rovers and Teslas lining the street. My knuckles were white as I gripped the steering wheel. The house I had bought for them, the house that was supposed to be a sanctuary for my grandchildren, was currently vibrating with the bass of electronic music. They were throwing a party, a bon voyage party, for a trip that I had paid for and from which I had just been unceremoniously banned. I stepped out of the truck, smoothing down my windbreaker. I could feel the eyes of strangers on me immediately. Young men in slim-fit suits and women holding champagne flutes stood on the manicured lawn, the lawn I paid a landscaping service $500 a month to maintain. They looked at my scuffed work boots and my gray hair with a mixture of confusion and disdain. I heard a whisper drift toward me from a group of 20-somethings. "Is that the gardener?" someone asked, followed by a ripple of light, cruel laughter. I did not correct them. I walked up the stone path, my eyes fixed on the front door. It was open, inviting the warm summer air into the foyer I had repainted myself just last year. Inside the scene was a slap in the face. They had gone all out with the Italian theme. There were banners draped across the banisters in the colors of the Italian flag. A table was piled high with expensive cheeses, prosciutto, and bottles of Chianti that I knew cost $80 a pop. And in the center of the room, holding court like royalty, were my daughter Madison, her husband Todd, and my granddaughter Emma. Madison was wearing a new designer dress, something flowy and expensive, that she must have bought with the supplementary credit card I gave her for emergencies. She was laughing, her head thrown back, looking radiant and completely unburdened by the fact that she had just cut her father out of his own anniversary celebration. Todd was topping off glasses of wine, playing the benevolent host, expanding his chest as he told some story where he was undoubtedly the hero. Then they saw me. The laughter died in Madison's throat. She stiffened, her eyes darting to the guests around her, assessing the damage to her social standing. She did not come to greet me. She did not ask if I was okay. She marched over to me, grabbing my elbow and steering me toward the kitchen island, away from the main crowd, like I was a drunk uncle who had crashed a wedding. "Dad," she hissed, her voice a tight whisper. "What are you doing here? You can't just show up like this. We have guests, important people. Todd's potential investors are here." I looked at her, really looked at her. This was the girl I had taught to ride a bike. The girl whose tuition I had paid without question. "I received your text, Madison," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I thought we should discuss it in person." Todd sauntered over, then swirling his wine glass. He had that arrogant smirk plastered on his face, the one that always made me want to check the structural integrity of his jaw. "Look, Larry," he said loud enough for the people in the living room to hear. "We don't want a scene. We explained the situation. It is about boundaries. You are a grown man, you should understand that sometimes gifts need to be given without strings attached. Strings attached. I repeated, feeling the blood pressure rise in my temples. You think expecting to go on my own 50th anniversary trip, which I paid for entirely, is a string? Todd chuckled, shaking his head as if he were explaining quantum physics to a toddler. That is exactly the problem, Larry. You hold money over our heads. You spent $130,000 on this renovation, sure, and we appreciate it. But that does not buy you a seat at our table. A gift is a gift. Once you give it, you don't get to dictate how it is used or who gets to enjoy it, Sean. You are trying to buy control, and frankly, it is toxic. I looked around the kitchen. The Sub-Zero fridge, the Wolf range, the marble countertops. I had signed the checks for every single item in this room. And here was this man, a man who had not held a steady job in 4 years, lecturing me on the philosophy of giving. Then Emma walked in. My granddaughter. She was holding her phone, the camera lens pointed at her face, likely live streaming to her followers. She lowered the phone when she saw me, and her expression shifted from performative joy to genuine annoyance. Ugh. Grandpa, seriously, she groaned, rolling her eyes. You are totally ruining the vibe. I have friends here. I am trying to create content for my travel blog launch. Having you standing here looking like that, it is just not the aesthetic we are going for. The aesthetic, I asked, my voice low. Yeah, the aesthetic, Emma snapped. We are going for European chic nuclear family luxury. You are giving off sad, lonely pensioner energy. It is depressing. Please just go. We will send you a postcard or something. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It was precise. It was calculated to hurt. They truly believed I was nothing more than an endless resource, a tap that would keep flowing, no matter how much filth they poured into it. They looked at me with such entitlement, so secure in their belief that I would just take it, that I would bow my head, apologize for existing, and write them another check to make up for ruining their mood. I looked down at the marble island. Sitting there amidst the antipasto platters was a stack of printed itineraries. Global Airlines, business class. The confirmation numbers were bold and black. They were ready to go. They had everything planned down to the minute, and I was nowhere on those pages. I reached into my pocket. I didn't pull out my wallet. I didn't pull out my checkbook. I pulled out my old, trusty box cutter. It was a habit from 40 years on construction sites. I never went anywhere without it. The metal casing was scratched and worn, the blade retractable. The sound of the blade sliding out was a sharp click, click, click that cut through the ambient chatter of the party. Todd flinched. Whoa, Larry, what is that? Put that away, you are scaring people. I didn't look at him. I reached out and picked up the top itinerary. It was Emma's. I placed the paper on the smooth, cold marble of the counter I paid for. Dad, what are you doing? Madison asked, her voice trembling slightly. I pressed the tip of the blade into the paper. I didn't slash it wildly. I was an engineer. I was precise. I dragged the blade slowly down the center of the document. The sound of the steel slicing through the paper and scoring the expensive finish of the marble underneath was a harsh grinding noise. Scrap! I cut right through the confirmation number. Then I cut it again, horizontally. You said gifts shouldn't have strings attached. Todd, I said, my eyes locked on his. You are absolutely right. So I am cutting the strings. All of them. I moved to the next itinerary. Madison's. Scrap. The blade bit deep. You said I was ruining the vibe, Emma, I said, slicing through her name on the paper. You are right about that, too. The vibe is officially dead. I grabbed the entire stack of papers, Todd lunged forward to stop me, but I turned the blade toward him not to hurt him, just to show him the edge. He froze, his cowardice instantly overriding his arrogance. I threw the shredded confetti of their travel plans into the air. It fluttered down onto the plates of expensive prosciutto and cheese. "This is just the beginning," I said, retracting the blade with a final decisive click. "Enjoy the party. It is the last one you will ever throw in this house." I turned my back on them. I could hear Madison hyperventilating. I could hear Emma gasping. "My God, he is crazy." I could hear Todd sputtering about calling the police. I walked out of the kitchen, through the foyer, and out the front door. The music was still thumping. The guests were still drinking my champagne, unaware that the host had just been structurally condemned. I walked past the expensive cars, past the judgmental stares of their friends, and climbed back into my Ford. As I started the engine, I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was going to happen next. I had analyzed the load, found the stress points, and now I was going to bring the whole thing down. The demolition had begun. I arrived back at my own house, a sanctuary of silence and order compared to the circus I had just left. My home was modest, but built with materials that lasted. Solid oak floors, brick walls, and triple-pane windows that kept the world at bay. I walked straight to my study. It was a room lined with bookshelves filled with engineering manuals, history texts, and architectural encyclopedias. My desk was a massive slab of mahogany that I had restored myself years ago. It was mission control. I sat down in my Eames chair and woke up my desktop computer. The dual monitors flickered to life, bathing the darkened room in a cool blue glow. I cracked my knuckles. For 40 years, I had managed multi-million-dollar construction budgets. I knew how to track every penny, and I knew how to stop the flow of capital with surgical precision. Today, I was not building a skyscraper. I was demolishing a house of cards. I logged into my American Express Centurion account first. The interface was sleek, black, and silver. I navigated to the card management section. There they were. 3 supplementary cards attached to my primary account. Madison Bennett, Todd Reynolds, Emma Reynolds. I clicked on Madison is card first to view the recent activity. My jaw tightened as I scrolled. $3,000 at a designer boutique yesterday. $400 at a high-end salon this morning. $800 at a liquor store for the party I had just crashed. They were spending my money to celebrate my exclusion. I did not hesitate. I selected the option to cancel the card. A dialog box popped up asking for the reason. I typed in, "Card no longer authorized by primary account holder." I clicked confirm. The status changed instantly from active to canceled. Next was Todd. His history was a litany of pathetic attempts to look successful. Golf club fees, expensive cigars, fancy dinners in the city. He was living the life of a Wall Street tycoon on the budget of a retired engineer. I clicked cancel, confirm, done. Then Emma, my granddaughter. Her charges were a stream of rideshares, delivery apps, and online fashion retailers. She was 19 and had never worked a day in her life, yet she spent more in a week than I used to make in a month starting out. I clicked cancel, confirm, done. In less than 5 minutes, I had cut off their access to roughly $100,000 of potential credit. They were currently standing in a house full of guests, likely trying to order more food, or perhaps book new flights on another airline. When they pulled out those heavy black cards, they were going to be nothing more than useless pieces of plastic. But credit cards were just the surface. I opened my email client. I needed to address the structural issues. I composed a new email to the bursar at prestigious Wellington Academy, where Emma was currently enrolled as a sophomore undergraduate. I paid her tuition, room and board, and a generous stipend for living expenses. It cost me $65,000 a year. Subject: withdrawal of financial guarantee. Student Emma Reynolds. Dear Mr. Thompson, please be advised that effective immediately, the Bennett Revocable Trust will no longer be responsible for any tuition fees, housing costs, or incidental expenses regarding the student Emma Reynolds. Any future invoices should be directed to her parents, Todd and Madison Reynolds. Please remove my banking information from the autopay system immediately. Regards, Lawrence Bennett. I hit send. That was a $65,000 reality check flying through cyberspace. Todd and Madison did not have $65,000. They did not have 65,000 cents. Next, I logged into the utility accounts for the house on Elm Street. Because the deed was in my name, so were the utilities. I paid for the electricity, the gas, the water, and the premium fiber optic internet package that Todd insisted he needed for his day trading. I navigated to the internet service provider. I selected the option for disconnect service. The system asked for a date. I selected today, immediate. I knew how these automated systems worked. Within the hour, the modem in that house would stop communicating with the server. The music at their party, which I knew was streaming from the cloud, would cut out. The smart TV would go black. The Wi-Fi would vanish. I did the same for the landscaping service. I sent a text to Green Thumb Landscaping. Hey Dave, it is Larry. Cancel the weekly service at Elm Street effective now. Do not mow, do not trim, do not fertilize. I will let you know if I need you for my own property. Thanks. Dave replied instantly. You got it, Larry. Thanks for the heads up. Then I picked up my landline. I dialed the number for secure lock and safe. The owner was a guy named Sal I had worked with on commercial projects for decades. Sal, it is Larry Bennett. Hey Larry, what can I do for you? I need a rush job, Sal. The property on Elm Street. The one with the electronic wrought iron gates. Yeah, I know it. I need you to go over there tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp. I need you to change the master code on the gate and rekey the front and back doors. Tomorrow morning. Is there a problem, Larry? I am evicting the tenants, Sal. They do not know it yet, but they are leaving. I want to make sure that once they are out, they stay out. I hear you. I will be there. Do you want me to bring the heavy-duty deadbolts? The heaviest you have, Sal. And bring the eviction clamps for the garage doors too, just in case. Consider it done. I hung up the phone. My checklist was complete. I had severed the credit. I had revoked the education funding. I had cut the utilities. I had secured the perimeter. I had systematically dismantled the infrastructure of their lives without leaving my chair. I sat back and let out a long, slow breath. It was a feeling of profound satisfaction. It was the feeling of correcting a mistake, of aligning a crooked beam. I had enabled them for too long, thinking I was helping. But you do not help a parasite by feeding it. You help the host by removing it. I stood up and walked over to the vintage record player in the corner of the room. I flipped through my vinyl collection and pulled out John Coltrane Is Blue Train. I placed the needle on the groove, and the smooth, complex notes of the saxophone filled the room. I walked to the small bar cart and poured myself a glass of Cabernet. It was a vintage I had been saving for a special occasion. This felt special enough. I sat down on the leather sofa, glass in hand, and looked at my cell phone, which I had left on the desk. It started to vibrate. First it was a text notification, then another, then a call. The screen lit up with Madison's name. I watched it buzz and dance across the polished wood of the desk. She was calling. Then she hung up. Then she called again immediately. Then a text from Todd popped up on the lock screen. Larry, the card is not working. We are at the liquor store trying to buy ice and the card says declined. Call the bank. Fix this, fix this. He still thought it was an error. He still thought I was his administrative assistant. Then a text from Emma. Grandpa, the Wi-Fi just died. I am in the middle of uploading a story. Did you forget to pay the bill? I took a sip of the wine. It was rich and full-bodied. The saxophone solo escalated, reaching a crescendo of chaotic beauty. My phone was now vibrating constantly, a relentless drumbeat of panic. They were realizing that the world was closing in on them. They were realizing that the air conditioning might be next. They were realizing that they had no money, no internet, and no plane tickets. I did not reach for the phone. I did not feel the urge to answer. I watched it buzz like an insect trapped in a jar. I imagined the scene at the house, the music stopping, the awkward silence as the guests checked their phones and realized the Wi-Fi was gone. Todd trying to swipe the black card again and again, sweating, as the cashier looked at him with pity. Madison frantically trying to call the airline again, only to find out she had no booking reference. It was a symphony of consequences, and I was the conductor. I closed my eyes and let the jazz wash over me. I thought about Tuscany. I thought about the villa I had rented, the one they would never see. I thought about the peace I would find there. Let them call. Let them text. Let them scream into the void. The Bank of Lawrence was closed, the customer service department had been disbanded, and the CEO was on vacation. I took another sip of wine and smiled. The demolition was proceeding exactly according to schedule. And tomorrow, when the sun came up, the real heavy machinery would arrive. I sat in my study, the silence of the room broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning and the rhythmic tapping of my fingers against the side of my wine glass. I checked my watch. It was 5:30 in the afternoon. At this exact moment, 3,000 miles away from the peace I had reclaimed, the Bennett Reynolds clan would be arriving at John F. Kennedy International Airport. I did not need to be there to see it. I knew them better than they knew themselves. I knew their routine. I knew their arrogance. And I knew exactly how the next hour would unfold. I closed my eyes and pictured it. They would have taken a luxury SUV service, probably an Escalade that they charged to my account before I cut it off. They would pull up to the curbside check-in not for economy passengers, but for the priority access lane. They would have at least 6 suitcases. Madison never traveled light. She believed that packing was a competitive sport, and the more Louis Vuitton canvas you could stack on a cart, the higher your score. They would sweep through the automatic doors into Terminal 4, expecting the world to part for them. Madison would be wearing her oversized sunglasses indoors, pushing her chin up, looking down her nose at the families wrestling with strollers and the backpackers sleeping on the floor. She loved the airport because it was one of the few places where class stratification was explicitly enforced by velvet ropes and gold status cards. She loved walking past the long snake-like lines of regular people and stepping onto the plush red carpet of the business class counter. But today, that red carpet was going to turn into quicksand. I took a sip of my Cabernet, imagining the moment they approached the counter. I knew the agent would be polite. They always were. "Good afternoon, where are we flying today?" the agent would ask. Rome Madison would say, flipping her hair. "Global 1 business class, 3 passengers. And make sure we have access to the flagship lounge we need to grab a drink before boarding." She would hand over the passports. The agent would type on the keyboard. Click, click, click. And then the pause. I knew that pause. It is the silence of a system error. It is the moment when the computer says no. The agent would frown. She would type again, harder this time, as if force could change the digital reality. She would look at the screen, then look at Madison, then look at the screen again. "I am sorry, ma'am," the agent would say, her voice dropping an octave. "I am not showing a valid reservation for these passports." "Excuse me," Madison would laugh, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "That is impossible. My father booked these months ago. Lawrence Bennett. Look it up under his name. We are on the same itinerary." The agent would type again. "Ah, I see Mr. Bennett here. He is confirmed in seat 4A. But the other passengers on this record. It shows here that the tickets were cancelled and refunded to the original form of payment at 2:15 p.m. today." The silence that would follow that statement would be heavier than concrete. My phone on the desk suddenly lit up. It buzzed violently, dancing across the mahogany surface. It was Madison. I did not answer. Not yet. I wanted them to simmer. I wanted the reality to sink in. I imagined the scene escalating. Todd would step in then. He always did when he thought he could bully someone into submission. He would lean over the counter, invading the agent's personal space. "Listen to me," he would say, puffing out his chest. "There has been a glitch in your system. We have a villa waiting for us in Tuscany. We have non-refundable tours booked. You need to fix this right now. Put us back on the plane." "I cannot do that, sir," the agent would reply, her patience wearing thin. "The seats have been released. The flight is fully booked." "Then get us on the next one," Todd would demand. "First class. And I expect compensation for this stress." "Sir, if you want to purchase new tickets for the next flight, I can check availability, but you will have to pay the current fare." "Fine," Todd would snap, pulling out his wallet. "Just do it. We will sort this out with the old man later. Here." He would slap the black American Express card onto the counter. The supplementary card. The one attached to my account. The one I had canceled 3 hours ago. This was the moment. The moment of impact. The agent would take the card. She would swipe it. Beep. A harsh, angry red sound. She would try it again. Maybe she would wipe the magnetic strip on her blouse, thinking it was just dirty. Beep. "I am sorry, sir, this card has been declined." "Declined," Todd would shout. "That is a Centurion card. It has no limit. Run it again." "I have run it twice, sir. It says do not honor. Do you have another form of payment?" Todd would look at Madison. Madison would look at Todd. They would look at Emma, who was likely standing there with her mouth open, realizing that her content creation trip was evaporating. "Here, try mine," Madison would say, digging into her purse. She would pull out her own supplementary card. Beep. Declined. The line behind them would be growing. Business executives looking at their watches. Wealthy tourists tapping their feet. The whispers would start. Look at them. Trying to fly business class with no money. Probably scammers. The shame would be physical. It would start as a heat in their necks and rise to their faces. The agent would look at them, not with deference, but with pity. And pity to people like Madison and Todd was worse than hatred. "Sir Ma, if you cannot pay for the tickets, I am going to have to ask you to step aside. You are holding up the line." My phone buzzed again, and again, and again. I picked it up. I swiped the green button. I didn't say hello, I just listened. Dad Madison screamed. The sound was distorted by the background noise of the airport announcements and the sheer hysteria in her voice. "Dad, pick up." "Oh my God," he answered. "Dad, what did you do?" "We are at the counter. They canceled our tickets. They said you canceled them, and the cards aren't working. We are standing here like idiots, and people are staring." I took another sip of wine. The jazz music was still playing softly in the background. "Hello, Madison," I said, my voice calm, level. "I assume you are at the airport." "You know we are at the airport," she shrieked. "Why did you cancel the tickets Todd is trying to pay, but the cards are declined? Fix this immediately. The agent is threatening to call security." I leaned back in my chair. I remembered her text message. "Nuclear family only." "There is nothing to fix, Madison," I said. "You sent me a message. You said you wanted a nuclear family vacation. You wanted boundaries. You wanted independence. That didn't mean cancel the trip," she yelled. "It meant you stay home." "Exactly," I said. "I am staying home. And since I am not part of the vacation, my money isn't either. I refunded the tickets because they were purchased with my funds. I canceled the cards because they are paid off by my funds. You wanted to be a nuclear family. Well, nuclear families pay their own way." "Dad, this isn't funny." Todd grabbed the phone. I could hear his heavy breathing. "Larry, listen to me. You have made your point." "Ha ha. Very funny. Now unlock the cards. The tickets are $10,000 each now because it is last minute. We need to buy them now or we miss the connection. Unlock the cards. Larry Todd. I said, my voice dropping to a tone I used to use when firing incompetent subcontractors. The cards are not locked. They are closed, terminated. You don't have a credit line anymore. What Todd gasped. But we have expenses. We have the hotel in Rome. We have the driver booked. And I suggest you cancel those too, I said, unless you have $40,000 hidden in your sock drawer. I could hear Emma crying in the background. Grandpa, please, my followers think I am in the lounge. I posted a picture, I can't not go, and I felt a twinge of pity, but I crushed it instantly. She was 19. She was an adult. It was time she learned that likes on Instagram did not pay the rent. Emma, welcome to the real world, I said. In the real world, if you don't work, you don't eat, and you certainly don't fly business class to Italy. Dad Madison was back on the phone, sobbing now. Dad, please. We are humiliated. Everyone is looking at us. We sent our luggage through already, and now they have to offload it. Please just buy the tickets. We will pay you back. I swear. Pay me back. I laughed dryly. With what, Madison? You don't have a job. Todd hasn't made a commission in 3 years. You are living on my charity and you just spit in my face. No. Then what are we supposed to do? She wailed. We are stranded at JFK. I looked at the clock on the wall. I checked the flight schedules earlier. Madison, I said, there is a budget carrier flying to Rome in about 4 hours. It is not direct. You have a layover in Iceland, and then another one in London. It is economy class only. No meals included. Economy, she whispered the word like it was a disease. Yes, I said. The tickets are about $600 each. If you scrape together whatever cash you have in your wallets, maybe pawn a watch or two, you might just be able to afford it. You want us to fly economy? With 2 stops, I want you to do whatever you can afford, I said. That is what independent adults do. They live within their means. Dad, you can't do this. I already did, I said. And Madison, what? She sniffled. Don't bother taking a taxi back to the house. Why? Because I changed the locks. I said. And by the time you get back from your imaginary vacation, the sheriff will be there with an eviction notice. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't want to hear the explosion. I pressed the red button ending the call. I placed the phone face down on the desk. The silence returned to the room. I imagined them standing there amidst the bustle of Terminal 4. The agent waving the next passenger forward. The security guard eyeing their pile of luggage suspiciously. The realization crashing down on them that they were not special. They were not elite. They were just 3 broke people with expensive tastes and no way to pay for them. Fly cheap, I whispered to the empty room. Or don't fly at all. I poured myself another glass of wine. My own flight left tomorrow morning. First class, direct. And I intended to sleep the entire way. The next morning I drove into the city. The skyline was sharp against the blue sky, a grid of steel and glass that I had helped build. I knew the skeleton of this city. I knew which buildings would sway in the wind and which ones would stand firm for a century. I was on my way to see a man who understood a different kind of structure, the structure of the law. I parked my truck in the underground garage of a 50-story tower on 5th Avenue. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor. The doors opened onto a lobby that smelled of money and intimidation. This was the domain of Arthur Wallace. Wallace was not a family lawyer. He was not the kind of guy you called to write a simple will or handle a traffic ticket. Wallace was a corporate shark. He was the man you called when you wanted to hostilely take over a company or crush a union strike. He wore suits that cost $5,000, and he billed his time in 6-minute increments that cost more than most people earned in a day. I had kept Wallace on retainer for 20 years. He had handled my business contracts, my liability issues, and the formation of my estate. He was the only person on earth besides me who knew exactly how much I was worth. I walked into his corner office. The view was panoramic. Wallace stood up from behind a glass desk. He was a tall man with silver hair and eyes like polished flint. "Lawrence," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm, dry. "You look like a man on a mission. I received your email about the trust modification." I sat down in the leather chair opposite him. "I am not just modifying the trust, Arthur. I am weaponizing it." Wallace raised an eyebrow. He sat down and tented his fingers. "Explain." I told him everything. I told him about the renovations. I told him about the exclusion from the trip. I told him about the scene at the airport and the credit cards. I told him about filling in the pool. Wallace listened without interrupting. He did not look shocked. He did not look sympathetic. He looked like a surgeon evaluating a trauma patient. When I finished, he leaned back. "So let me get this straight. You want to evict your daughter, her husband, and your granddaughter from the Elm Street property?" "Yes." "And you want to ensure they have no claim to any future assets in the Bennett Revocable Trust?" "Correct." Wallace nodded slowly. He tapped a pen against the glass desk. "Okay, let us look at the foundation, the house on Elm Street. Who is on the deed?" "I am," I said. "Or rather, the trust is the Lawrence Bennett Revocable Living Trust. I am the sole trustee. And what is the status of Madison and Todd living there? Do they have a lease? Do they pay rent?" "No lease," I said. "They have never paid a dime. I let them live their verbal agreement." Wallace smiled. A predator is smile. "Excellent. In the eyes of the law, they are tenants at will. Actually, given that they do not pay rent and there is no contract, they are barely even tenants. They are licensees, guests who have overstayed their welcome. This makes things much easier." "How fast can we get them out?" I asked. Wallace pulled a legal pad toward him. "If they were paying tenants with a lease, we would have to give them significant notice. In this state, evictions can take months. But since they are essentially guests living on your charity, we can move faster. However, we still need to follow due process to avoid a wrongful eviction suit." "Todd strikes me as the kind of man who would sue his own shadow if he thought it had deep pockets." "He is," I confirmed. "So we serve them with a notice to quit," Wallace said, writing rapidly. "We give them 30 days. That is the standard. It is generous considering they pay nothing, but it makes you look reasonable to a judge." 30 days is too long," I said. "I want them out." Wallace held up a hand. "Patience, Lawrence. We play the long game. We serve the 30-day notice, but we add a clause for nuisance and waste." "Waste." Legal term, Wallace explained. "It means damage to the property. Did they alter the house without your written permission?" "They tore out the kitchen," I said. "They started digging a pool. I authorized the work verbally, but I never signed a contract allowing them to modify the structure. The contracts were between me and the builder." "Perfect," Wallace said. "We argue that their occupancy is causing damage to the asset. That gives us leverage. But here is the real trap, Lawrence. The revocable trust. Tell me, the beauty of a revocable trust, as you know, is that you retain total control during your lifetime. The assets are yours. The beneficiaries have no rights until you die. Madison and Todd might think they are entitled to that house because they have lived there for 10 years. They might think they have squatter's rights or some equitable interest. But the trust protects you. The trust owns the house. You own the trust. You can change the beneficiaries at any second. You can sell the assets at any second." "I want to sell it," I said. "I want a for sale sign on that lawn by Monday." Wallace nodded. As the trustee, you have the fiduciary duty to manage the trust assets responsibly. If the property is not generating income, and the occupants are costing the trust money in taxes and maintenance, you have a legal obligation to liquidate the asset. We frame this not as a father kicking out his daughter, but as a trustee making a sound financial decision. I like that, I said. It is cold. It is logical. It is bulletproof. Wallace agreed. I will draft the notice to quit immediately. I will have a process server deliver it to the house tomorrow morning. They are probably still stuck in New York or flying back, so we will tape it to the door and send a certified copy by mail. That starts the clock. Good. Wallace paused. He looked at me, and his expression softening just a fraction. Lawrence, I have to ask, as your lawyer and your friend, are you sure about this? This is the nuclear option. Once we serve these papers, you are crossing a line that is very hard to uncross. They are your family. You are rendering them homeless. I looked out the window at the city below. I thought about the disrespect. I thought about the entitlement. I thought about the way they looked at me like I was nothing more than a checkbook with a pulse. I am not rendering them homeless. Arthur, I said, my voice steady. I am rendering them independent. Wallace sighed. It feels cruel, Lawrence. A judge might see it as vindictive. It is not punishment, I said, turning back to face him. It is education. Education. Yes. Look at them, Arthur. Look at what I created. Madison is 40 years old. She cannot balance a checkbook. She treats service staff like dirt. She thinks the world owes her a first-class seat. Todd is a leech who thinks he is a shark. And Emma, my granddaughter, she thinks her value comes from strangers on the internet. I did that. You did that, Wallace asked. I did. By protecting them. By cushioning every fall. By paying every bill. I built a structure with no load-bearing walls, Arthur. I built a life for them that has no integrity. If I die tomorrow and leave them that money, they will be destitute in 5 years. They will eat themselves alive. So you are cutting them off to save them. I am cutting them off to force them to build their own foundation, I said. They need to know what it feels like to carry their own weight. They need to know what it feels like to be cold so they can appreciate the heat. They need to know that a roof over your head is a privilege earned by sweat, not a right granted by birth. Wallace studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Tough love. Structural reinforcement, I corrected. Very well, Wallace said. He typed a few commands into his computer. The printer in the corner whirred to life. Here is the plan, he said. We serve the notice to quit. We simultaneously file a petition to dissolve any implied tenancy. We also send a formal letter demanding repayment of the unauthorized credit card charges, that $130,000 you spent on the renovations. We cannot get that back easily, but we can claim it as a loan against their future inheritance, which you are about to revoke anyway. It adds pressure. Do it, I said. Wallace pulled the fresh pages from the printer. He slid them across the mahogany desk toward me. A heavy black fountain pen followed. Sign here, Lawrence. This authorizes the eviction. This removes Madison and Emma as beneficiaries of the trust. This redirects all assets upon your death to the charities we discussed previously, the Wounded Warrior Project and the Engineering Scholarship Fund. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy in my hand, cold and substantial. This was it. This was the signature that would turn my daughter from an heiress into a woman with nothing but her own wits to rely on. I did not hesitate. I signed my name in bold black ink. Lawrence Edward Bennett. Wallace took the papers back. He organized them into a crisp folder. It is done, he said. By tomorrow morning, the legal machinery will be in motion. They will have 30 days to vacate. If they refuse, the sheriff will physically remove them. Let them refuse, I said, standing up. I hope they do. One more thing, Wallace said. They are going to come for you, Lawrence. They will get a lawyer, probably a cheap one, but they will try. They will claim you are senile. They will claim you promised them the house. They will try to get an emergency guardianship to freeze your assets. I know, I said. Let them try. I have my medical records. I have my sanity. And I have you. Wallace smiled, a shark sensing blood in the water. Yes, you do. And I haven't lost a case like this in 30 years. I walked to the door. Thank you, Arthur. Send the bill to the trust. I will. Enjoy Italy. Lawrence, I walked out of the office and back to the elevator. I felt lighter. The paperwork was signed. The foundation was laid. The demolition charges were set. Now all I had to do was wait for the explosion. I got back into my truck and checked my phone. No new calls. They were probably on that budget flight right now, cramped in economy seats, eating peanuts and realizing that their legs did not have enough room. I drove home feeling a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. I was not just an old man being pushed aside anymore. I was the architect of their new reality. And tomorrow, when they arrived back at the house expecting to find a way to manipulate me, they were going to find a legal notice taped to the front door that said, "Game over." I parked my truck 3 houses down the street, nestled behind a large oak tree that provided just enough cover. I rolled the window down, letting the humid afternoon air fill the cab. I had a thermos of black coffee and a pair of binoculars. I was not there to intervene. I was there to inspect the site conditions. In engineering, we call this post-disaster assessment. You have to observe how the structure fails under stress to know if the demolition was successful. It was 3 in the afternoon when the Uber XL pulled up to the curb. It was not the sleek black limousine they had taken to the airport the day before. It was a battered minivan with a dent in the rear bumper. The driver did not get out to open the doors. He simply popped the trunk and waited. I watched through the binoculars as the sliding door opened. Madison stepped out first. She looked like a woman who had gone 10 rounds with a hurricane and lost. Her designer dress was wrinkled and stained, probably from a spilled drink in the cramped economy cabin. Her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was a frizzy mess. The sunglasses were gone, revealing eyes that were puffy and red. Todd climbed out next. He looked even worse. His linen suit was crushed, and he had the shadow of a beard that made him look less like a financier and more like a man who had spent the night on a park bench. He dragged the heavy Louis Vuitton suitcases out of the trunk, dropping them onto the asphalt with a heavy thud. He didn't have the energy to lift them properly. Then Emma emerged. She was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie with the hood pulled up tight over her head. She wasn't holding her phone up to record content. She was clutching it to her chest like a lifeline, staring at the ground. The humiliation of the budget flight, with its multiple layovers and lack of legroom, had clearly broken her spirit. They stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the house. The house I bought. The house that stood tall and pristine in the afternoon sun. They probably thought the nightmare was over. They probably thought they could just walk inside, take a shower, and sleep for a week. They began the slow trudge up the driveway. The wheels of their expensive luggage clattered loudly against the pavers, a sound that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. They reached the front door. Todd reached for the keypad on the lock. I saw him punch in the code. Nothing happened. The light on the lock flashed red. He punched it again, harder this time. Beep, beep, beep. Red light. I took a sip of coffee. Sal, the locksmith, was worth every penny. "What is wrong with it?" Madison snapped, her voice carrying down the street. "Just open the door, Todd. I need to pee." "It is not working," Todd said, jiggling the handle. "The battery must be dead, or the system reset. Try the app." Emma said, her voice muffled by her hood. "Use the smart home app." Todd pulled out his phone. I watched him tap the screen. Then he froze. He tapped it again. He shook the phone. I disconnected the hub, I whispered to myself. There is no smart home anymore, Todd. Just a dumb house with a locked door. We are locked out, Todd shouted, kicking the bottom of the door. I cannot get in. Let us go around the back, Madison said. The patio door usually has a spare key under the planter. They left the pile of luggage on the porch and marched around the side of the house toward the backyard. I shifted in my seat, adjusting my view to catch the edge of the rear lawn. I couldn't see them directly when they went behind the fence, but I heard the reaction instantly. It started as a gasp, then a scream, a long, high-pitched shriek of pure horror that sent a flock of birds scattering from the trees. Oh my God. Oh my God. My pool. It was Madison. She had just seen the backyard. I imagined what she was seeing. Yesterday morning it had been a gaping hole full of promise, a symbol of her future luxury. Now it was a mound of ugly brown dirt mixed with rocks and clay. Mike's crew had packed it down tight. It looked like a fresh grave, a grave for their vanity. I heard Todd roaring a sound of impotent male rage. He filled it in. That psycho filled it in. They came storming back around to the front of the house. Their exhaustion had been replaced by adrenaline. They were furious. They ran up the porch steps ready to break a window if they had to. That was when they finally noticed it. In their initial rush to get inside, they had missed the bright orange piece of paper taped to the center of the mahogany door at eye level. It was not a sticky note. It was a legal document, taped securely on all four corners with heavy-duty duct tape. Todd ripped it off the door, tearing the paper slightly. He held it up, his hands shaking. "What is it?" Madison demanded, grabbing his arm. "Is it a note from Dad?" Todd read it. I saw his face drain of color. He slumped against the doorframe as if his legs had suddenly turned to water. "It is a notice to quit," he whispered, "and a no trespassing order." "What does that mean?" Madison screamed, snatching the paper from him. She read it out loud, her voice trembling with hysteria. "Notice to quit. To the occupants of 12 Elm Street. You are hereby notified that your tenancy at will is terminated effective immediately. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Failure to do so will result in formal eviction proceedings." She looked up at the house as if it had suddenly grown teeth. "He is evicting us. He is actually evicting us." "And look at the bottom," Todd said, pointing to the fine print. "It says the locks have been changed to secure the asset against further waste and damage. We cannot get in Madison. All our stuff is inside. My clothes, my computer." Emma started crying, a loud, wailing sound like a toddler who dropped an ice cream cone. "My makeup is in there. My ring light. Where am I supposed to sleep?" Todd looked around the front yard looking for something, anything, to vent his frustration on. His eyes landed on the vintage cast-iron urns I had placed on either side of the entryway. They were filled with expensive topiaries. With a roar, Todd grabbed one of the urns. He was not a strong man, but rage gave him a burst of energy. He lifted it and hurled it down the stairs. It shattered on the driveway, sending ceramic shards and potting soil exploding across the pristine pavers. He didn't stop there. He ran to the garden bed and started ripping out the hydrangea bushes I had planted 3 years ago. He was tearing them out by the roots, throwing them onto the lawn, kicking the dirt, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. "Larry, I know you are watching. Come out here, you coward. I will kill you." I sat in my truck, calm and detached. I took another sip of coffee. This was exactly what Wallace had predicted. Nuisance and waste. He was destroying the property in plain sight. He was digging his own legal grave. Across the street, the front door of the Gable residence opened. Mrs. Gable, the neighborhood watch captain, stepped out onto her porch. She was holding her phone horizontally, filming the entire scene. I saw Emma notice her. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't controlling the narrative anymore. She was the content. Stop filming, Emma shrieked, pulling her hood down further. Stop it! You cannot film us. This is private property. It is not your property anymore, honey, Mrs. Gable shouted back, her voice dripping with suburban judgment. And you are disturbing the peace. I am sending this to the Homeowners Association group chat right now. Emma collapsed onto the pile of luggage, burying her face in her hands. Madison, meanwhile, had pulled out her phone. She wasn't calling me. She was dialing 3 digits. I watched her face transform. She wiped the rage away and replaced it with a mask of terrified vulnerability. She was an actress getting into character. 911, she cried into the phone, her voice pitching up into a frantic sob. Please help me. I am at 12 Elm Street. My father, he has gone crazy. He locked us out of our house. We have nowhere to go. He is threatening us. I think he is having a mental break. Please send the police. We are scared for our lives. I shook my head. She was playing the victim card. She was trying to weaponize the police against me. She thought that if she cried hard enough, the officers would break down the door and let her back into the kingdom. She didn't know that I had already visited the precinct this morning. She didn't know that I had shown the desk sergeant the deed to the house, the eviction notice, and the medical report from my doctor, proving I was of sound mind. I had warned them that a disgruntled tenant might try to file a false report. I watched as she hung up the phone, hugging herself, and looking around nervously, as if expecting me to jump out of the bushes with an axe. Todd was still kicking the remains of the planter, panting heavily, his face a mask of sweat and dirt. They sat down on their suitcases in the middle of the driveway, a pathetic island of luggage in a sea of their own destruction. They waited for the police, expecting a rescue squad. I started the engine of my truck. I didn't turn on the lights. I backed slowly out of my spot, keeping the noise to a minimum. I had seen enough. The inspection was complete. The subjects were volatile, destructive, and delusional. As I drove away, I saw the flashing blue lights of a patrol car turning the corner. They were about to have a very interesting conversation with the officers, and it wasn't going to end with them sleeping in their beds tonight. I drove toward the highway. I had a flight to catch in the morning. A real flight. To a place where the wine was aged and the people knew the value of respect. Let them sleep on the lawn, I thought. The forecast called for rain. I was sitting in my study nursing a second glass of wine and listening to the rain begin to tap against the window pane when the doorbell rang. It was not a polite social ring. It was a heavy, authoritative pounding that demanded attention. I checked the security monitor on my desk. Blue and red strobe lights were bouncing off the wet pavement of my driveway. There were 2 patrol cars and an unmarked sedan parked behind my truck. I saw Madison standing on my porch. She was flanked by 2 uniformed officers and a woman in a beige raincoat holding a clipboard. Madison was putting on the performance of a lifetime. She was wringing her hands hunched over as if carrying the weight of the world, and I could see her mouth moving rapidly, likely spinning a tale of woe and dementia. I did not panic. I stood up, smoothed the lapels of my smoking jacket, and walked calmly to the front door. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked like a retired engineer enjoying a quiet evening, not a raving lunatic. I opened the door. "Good evening, officers," I said, my voice level and welcoming. "Can I help you?" Madison let out a choked sob and pointed a shaking finger at me. "There he is," she cried, turning to the woman with the clipboard. "See? He looks normal, but he is not. He is having an episode. He doesn't know what he is doing. He destroyed our house. He left us on the street. You have to help him. You have to take him into custody for his own safety." The lead officer, a burly man with a name tag that read Sergeant Miller, stepped forward. He had his hand resting near his belt, not on his weapon, but ready. "Sir, I am Sergeant Miller from the precinct. This is Ms. Jenkins from Adult Protective Services. We received a 911 call regarding a domestic disturbance and a potential mental health crisis. We need to come inside and ask you a few questions. Of course, Sergeant, I said, stepping back and holding the door open. Please come in. It is a nasty night out there. Ms. Jenkins, would you like some tea? I just brewed a fresh pot of Earl Grey. Ms. Jenkins looked surprised. She blinked rain from her eyelashes. She was expecting a hoarder's nest or a violent outburst. Instead, she walked into a pristine foyer with polished oak floors and the faint scent of lemon polish. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. That would be nice. They filed into my living room. Madison came last, hesitating on the threshold. She looked around my house with greedy eyes. This was the mothership. This was where the real assets were kept. She probably was already measuring the walls for new art. I gestured for them to sit on the Chesterfield sofas. I poured tea for Ms. Jenkins and water for the officers. I did not offer Madison anything. She remained standing, pacing nervously behind the sofa, playing the role of the distraught daughter. He is dangerous, she whispered to Ms. Jenkins. He keeps weapons. He used a box cutter to destroy our plane tickets. He hired thugs to vandalize the backyard. He thinks he is going to Italy tomorrow, but he doesn't even have a passport. He hid it. He is confused. Ms. Jenkins scribbled on her clipboard. She looked at me over her glasses. Mr. Bennett, your daughter claims you have been exhibiting erratic behavior, aggression, memory loss, financial recklessness. She claims you evicted her and her family from their home without notice and destroyed property. Can you explain your side of the story? I took a sip of my own tea. It was hot and calming. I set the cup down on a coaster. Ms. Jenkins, I appreciate your diligence. Elder abuse is a serious issue, and I am glad the state takes it seriously. However, what you are witnessing here is not a mental health crisis. It is a temper tantrum. Madison gasped. See? He is paranoid. He thinks we are against him. I ignored her. I reached under the coffee table and pulled out a thick leather binder. I had prepared it weeks ago, anticipating this exact moment. I am an engineer. I prepare for failure points. I slid the binder across the table to Sergeant Miller. Inside that binder, Sergeant, you will find a few documents of interest. The first is a notarized letter from Dr. Theodore Evans, my primary care physician, and a neurologist at Mount Sinai. I had a full cognitive evaluation 3 days ago. Miller opened the binder. He read the letter. His eyebrows went up. He says here you scored 30 out of 30 on the cognitive assessment. Patient is fully oriented, lucid, and displays above average executive function. Exactly, I said. I am not senile. I am not confused. I know exactly what day it is. It is Tuesday. I know who the president is, and I know that my daughter is trying to weaponize your department to regain access to my bank account. Madison stomped her foot. That doctor is a quack. Dad probably paid him off. Look at what he did to the house. He filled in our pool. I turned to the next tab in the binder. Ms. Jenkins, if you would look at the property deeds. The house at 12 Elm Street is owned by the Bennett Revocable Trust. I am the trustee. I authorized renovations, and when I realized the tenants were damaging the property financially and emotionally, I authorized the cessation of those renovations. It is my property. I can fill in a hole if I want to. But you evicted us without notice, Madison shrieked. We have rights. Sergeant Miller turned the page. Actually, ma'am, here is a copy of a notice to quit, dated today, filed with the court clerk. And here is an affidavit from the neighbors stating you have never paid rent. In this state that makes you a guest, not a tenant. Mr. Bennett has the right to revoke that invitation at any time, especially if there is evidence of waste or nuisance. I leaned forward, clasping my hands. But the most important document is in the back, Ms. Jenkins. Since we are talking about financial recklessness and the need for a conservatorship, which is clearly what my daughter is aiming for, let us look at the numbers. I pointed to a spreadsheet printed in landscape mode. It was color-coded. This is a summary of my credit card statements for the last 12 months, I said, my voice hardening. The highlighted charges were made by authorized user Madison Bennett. Ms. Jenkins leaned in her eyes, scanning the rows. $5,000 at Saks Fifth Avenue, $3,000 at a med spa, $2,000 at a Michelin star restaurant, totaling $115,000 in 1 year, I said. While I live here quietly drinking tea and driving a 10-year-old truck. I looked at Madison. She had stopped pacing. She was pale. I cut them off today, I explained to the officers. I stopped the flow of money. And suddenly I am senile. Suddenly I am a danger to myself. It is a classic pattern, isn't it? The abuser projects their actions onto the victim. Ms. Jenkins closed the clipboard. The click was loud in the silent room. She looked at Madison with a gaze that had shifted from sympathy to professional suspicion. Mrs. Reynolds, is it true that your father pays for your housing and living expenses? That is not the point, Madison stammered. The point is he is acting crazy. He stranded us at the airport. Because you tried to use a card that wasn't yours, I said. Sergeant Miller stood up. He handed the binder back to me. Mr. Bennett, you seem to have your affairs in order. This looks like a civil dispute regarding property and tenancy, not a police matter, and certainly not a reason for an involuntary psychiatric hold. But you cannot leave him here, Madison cried, grabbing the sergeant his arm. He is going to leave the country. He is going to Italy. He is abandoning us. Sergeant Miller pulled his arm away gently, but firmly. Ma, your father is a free adult. If he wants to go to Italy, he can go to Italy. And frankly, if I were him, I would go too. He turned to me. We apologize for the disturbance, sir. We have to investigate every call. I understand, Sergeant. You are doing your job. Miller turned back to Madison. His face was stern now, the cop face that brokered no arguments. Ma, I need to warn you. Misusing the 911 system to resolve family arguments is a crime. Filing a false report claiming someone is a danger to themselves when you know they are not is also a crime. It wastes our resources, and it could have led to your father being hurt if we had come in here expecting a violent individual. Madison shrank back. But if we have to come back out here tonight because you are harassing him. Miller continued, his voice dropping lower. I will be arresting you for filing a false report and for trespassing. Do you understand? Madison nodded, mute with shock. She looked at me, her eyes wide with betrayal, as if I were the one who had called the cops on her. Ms. Jenkins stood up as well. Mr. Bennett, I will be closing this file as unsubstantiated. However, I will be making a note in our system about this visit. If there are future reports from this individual, we will view them with extreme skepticism. And Mrs. Reynolds, I suggest you look into financial counseling. Elder financial abuse goes both ways. They escorted Madison to the door. She looked back at me one last time. I sat on my sofa sipping my tea, unmoving. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just looked at her. Get out of my house, Madison, I said softly. She turned and fled into the rain. The officers nodded to me and closed the door. I heard the patrol cars start up. I watched the blue and red lights fade from the window. The house was quiet again. The only sound was the rain. I picked up the binder and placed it back under the coffee table. It was a good binder. It had held the weight of the truth, and it had crushed her lies without me even having to raise my voice. I checked my watch. It was late. I had an early flight. I walked to the kitchen and rinsed my teacup. I looked at the empty spot on the counter where Madison used to leave her keys when she came to ask for money. That spot would stay empty now. I went upstairs to my bedroom. My suitcase was waiting. My passport was on the nightstand. Tomorrow I would be in the air, and Madison would be explaining to her husband why the police didn't arrest me but threatened to arrest her instead. I turned off the light and lay down in the dark, listening to the rain washing away the filth of the day. I slept like a baby. I settled into the leather seat of the first-class cabin as the plane reached cruising altitude. The flight attendant placed a glass of vintage Dom Perignon on my tray table, but I barely noticed. My attention was focused on the iPad propped up against the window shade. I was connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi, which cost more for the duration of the flight than Madison likely had left in her checking account. I was not checking the stock market or reading the news. I was logging into a secure server hosted in the Cayman Islands. Most people knew me as a retired structural engineer who lived in a nice but modest house in Connecticut. They saw the Ford truck and the flannel shirts and assumed I was comfortable but simple. They had no idea about the architecture of my wealth. I did not just build skyscrapers, I built layers of asset protection. 10 years ago, my wife Catherine was diagnosed with the illness that would eventually take her. We had always talked about Italy. We talked about the light in Tuscany, the way the sun hit the stone farmhouses in the late afternoon. I decided I was not going to wait for retirement. I liquidated a portion of my portfolio that I had managed quietly for decades, and I flew to Italy alone. I scouted the region for a week until I found it. A 17th-century farmhouse on a hilltop overlooking a vineyard near Siena. It was crumbling. The roof was sagging and the plumbing was non-existent. To anyone else, it was a ruin. To me, it was a project. It was a promise. I bought it for cash. But I did not put my name on the deed. I created a shell company called Caterina Holdings LLC, registered in a jurisdiction that prioritized privacy. I spent the next 2 years restoring it remotely, hiring the best local artisans to rebuild the stone walls and install modern amenities while keeping the rustic soul of the place intact. I installed a heated infinity pool that looked out over the olive groves. I built a chef's kitchen that rivaled the best restaurants in Florence. I presented it to Catherine on our 45th anniversary. We spent 3 summers there before she passed. It was her happy place. It was our sanctuary. Since her death, I had rented it out occasionally to high-net-worth individuals just to cover the maintenance costs and keep the staff employed, but I always blocked out this month for family. I had told Madison and Todd that I had rented a villa. I let them believe I was paying some landlord $10,000 a week. It was a test. I wanted to see if they would appreciate the gesture or if they would just consume it. They failed. Now, 30,000 feet in the air, I opened the administration portal for Caterina Holdings. There was a notification in the inboxes, marked urgent. It had arrived 40 minutes ago, just as my plane was taxiing for takeoff. I clicked on the message. The sender was Madison Reynolds. The subject line read, "Urgent booking issue payment verification." I took a sip of champagne and began to read. To the management of Villa Caterina. My name is Madison Reynolds. My father, Lawrence Bennett, made a reservation for our family for the entire month of July, commencing tomorrow. I am writing to inform you of a slight administrative mix-up regarding the payment. I paused. An administrative mix-up. That was what she called getting cut off for being a parasite. I continued reading. My father is an elderly man, and unfortunately his mental state has been deteriorating rapidly in recent weeks. He has become confused and paranoid, and in a moment of cognitive decline, he accidentally canceled our travel arrangements and attempted to interfere with our banking. We are currently sorting this out with his doctors and the authorities. However, we are fully intending to proceed with our vacation, as this time is crucial for our family healing. My grip on the champagne flute tightened. She was doing it again. Even in an email to a stranger in Italy, she was painting me as a senile, incompetent old man. She was willing to destroy my reputation internationally just to secure a bed to sleep in. The email went on. We are currently dealing with a temporary freeze on our primary credit cards due to his interference. However, my husband Todd Reynolds is a successful investment banker, and we have ample funds. We are requesting that you hold our reservation. We will arrive a day or 2 late as we are rebooking our flights, but we will pay the full balance in cash or via wire transfer upon arrival. Please confirm that the villa is ready for us. We need the master suite prepared and the pool heated to 85 degrees. Thank you for your understanding during this difficult family medical crisis. Sincerely, Madison Bennett Reynolds. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. She was broke. She was sitting in a house she had been evicted from with no plane tickets and no money, and she was trying to con a luxury villa in Italy into letting her in on credit. She was lying about my health, lying about Todd, his job, and lying about their ability to pay. Todd had not been an investment banker for 4 years. He was a day trader who lost money faster than he made it, and Madison did not have ample funds. She had my credit card number, which was now dead. I set down my glass. I cracked my knuckles. It was time to reply. I was not replying as her father. I was replying as the administrator of Katerina Holdings, LLC. I hit reply. I did not use a salutation. I went straight to the point. Dear Mrs. Reynolds, we have received your correspondence regarding the reservation originally held under the name Lawrence Bennett. I typed slowly, savoring every keystroke. Please be advised that the reservation for the Villa Caterina was cancelled by the account holder, Mr. Bennett, directly. The funds have been refunded to the original source. As per our policy, we respect the instructions of the contracting party. I paused, thinking about her claim of my mental decline. Furthermore, we have verified the status of the credit cards associated with your party through our payment processor. We have received a fraud alert indicating that unauthorized users attempted to access credit lines that have been terminated by the primary owner. I took a breath. Now for the kill shot. Given the discrepancies in your financial status and the serious allegations of credit fraud flagged in our system, Katerina Holdings LLC is unable to extend any credit or hold any reservation for you or your husband. We operate on a strict prepayment basis. Additionally, due to the nature of your email in which you attempt to leverage the medical status of a former client to bypass payment security protocols, we are marking your profile as high risk. I typed the final paragraph with a cold smile. Your names have been added to the regional hospitality blacklist for the Tuscany region. We share this list with all luxury rental properties and hotels in the area to prevent payment fraud. Do not attempt to contact this property again, or we will forward your correspondence to the Italian authorities as evidence of attempted wire fraud. Regards the management. I hit send. The email flew through the satellite internet down to a server in Europe and then back across the ocean to Madison's phone in New York. I leaned back in my seat. I imagined her reading it. She would be sitting on her suitcase in the driveway, or maybe huddled in a cheap motel room if they had scraped together enough cash for a night. She would read that she was not just rejected, she was blacklisted. She would read that her lies about my health had backfired spectacularly. She would realize that she could not talk her way out of this. She could not charm the manager. She could not bully the staff. The door to Italy was slammed shut, locked, and bolted. And the best part was, she had no idea it was me. She thought she was being rejected by a faceless corporation. She thought her bad luck was just the universe conspiring against her. She didn't know that the universe was sitting in seat 4A drinking champagne and watching her world burn from the stratosphere. I closed the iPad. I looked out the window at the clouds below. They looked like a white floor, solid and soft. The villa was waiting for me. My villa. The one I bought for Catherine. I was going to sit by that pool alone. I was going to drink the wine from my own vineyard. And I was going to enjoy the silence. Madison wanted a nuclear family vacation. Well, she got one. Just her husband, and her daughter trapped in New York, with no home, no money, and a reputation that was rapidly becoming toxic. I signaled the flight attendant. Another glass, please. As the plane flew east toward the sunrise, I felt a deep sense of closure. The secret of the villa was safe. And so was my legacy. They would never set foot on that property. Not while I was alive. And thanks to the documents I had signed with Wallace yesterday, not after I was dead either. I sat on the terracotta terrace of my villa in Tuscany, the evening sun casting long golden shadows across the olive groves. The air smelled of cypress and rosemary, a stark contrast to the sterile atmosphere I was watching on my laptop screen. I was attending the emergency guardianship hearing via a secure video link. It was 10 in the morning in New York, and the fluorescent lights of the family court made everyone look pale and sickly, especially Todd. He sat at the plaintiff's table next to a man in a suit that was 2 sizes too big. His lawyer was a man named Mr. Pendergast, who looked like he advertised on the back of a bus. Todd was sweating. I could see the sheen on his forehead, even through the pixelated feed. Madison sat in the gallery behind him, wringing her hands, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. I took a sip of my Brunello and adjusted the volume. I was not just a spectator, I was the target, but I had never felt safer. Beside me, virtually speaking, was Arthur Wallace. He stood in the courtroom looking like a lion who had just wandered into a petting zoo. His suit was impeccable. His posture was relaxed, and he had a file folder in front of him that looked heavy enough to crush a skull. "Your Honor," Pendergast began, his voice shrill and performative. "We are here today because Mr. Lawrence Bennett is in immediate danger. His mental faculties have deteriorated rapidly. In the last 48 hours, he has engaged in destructive manic behavior. He destroyed his own property, filling in a swimming pool that was under construction. He stranded his family at an airport due to a paranoid delusion about finances. And now he has fled the country, abandoning his dependents without resources. We are asking for an emergency temporary guardianship to freeze his assets and ensure his physical safety." I watched Todd nod vigorously, trying to look like the concerned son-in-law. He was playing the part of the reluctant hero stepping up to save the old man from himself. It was nauseating. The judge, a woman named Honorable Justice Holloway, looked at the screen. "Mr. Bennett, can you hear us?" Loud and clear. "Your Honor," I said into my microphone, my voice calm and steady. "I am currently enjoying a glass of wine in my home in Italy. I assure you I am quite safe, and my only delusion was believing my son-in-law was capable of earning a living." Todd jumped up. See? See how he talks? He is aggressive. He is not himself." "Sit down, Mr. Reynolds," Judge Holloway snapped. She turned her gaze to Wallace. "Mr. Wallace, do you have a response to these allegations?" Wallace stood up slowly. He didn't look at Todd. He looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, this petition is not an attempt to protect Mr. Bennett. It is a weaponized legal maneuver designed to cover up financial crimes and secure access to funds that the petitioner has no right to. We move to dismiss this petition with prejudice, and we have evidence to submit that will explain the true motivation behind Mr. Reynolds' sudden concern for my client is mental health." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Financial crimes, Mr. Wallace. Those are strong words in a guardianship hearing." "They are accurate words, Your Honor," Wallace said. He picked up the heavy file. He walked to the bench and handed a document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. He then walked over to the plaintiff's table and dropped a copy in front of Todd. Todd looked at the paper. I saw his eyes go wide. I saw his throat work as he swallowed a lump of pure terror. "What is this?" "Your Honor," Wallace asked rhetorically, turning to the courtroom. "This is a loan application submitted to First National Bank 6 weeks ago. It is a request for a home equity line of credit in the amount of $50,000 against the property at 12 Elm Street." Madison gasped in the gallery. She hadn't known about this. Wallace continued, his voice like a hammer striking steel. "The property, as we have established, is owned by the Bennett Trust. The only person authorized to borrow against it is the trustee, Mr. Lawrence Bennett. However, if you look at the signature line on page 4, you will see what appears to be Lawrence Bennett's signature." I zoomed in on the feed. Todd was shaking. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. Wallace pressed the button on the presentation remote, and the document appeared on the courtroom screens. "Now, Your Honor, my client is an engineer. His signature is precise, angular, and consistent. This signature, however, is shaky. It loops in the wrong places. We took the liberty of having a forensic handwriting analyst review this document against Mr. Reynolds' known handwriting samples. Objection! Pendergast shouted, jumping up. This is an ambush. We haven't seen this report. It goes to character and motivation, Wallace countered smoothly. Your client claims Mr. Bennett is incompetent. We argue that Mr. Bennett discovered this attempted fraud and took rational steps to protect his assets by evicting the perpetrator. The guardianship petition is simply a desperate attempt to seize control of the assets before this felony comes to light. The judge was reading the report, her glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked up at Todd. Her expression had shifted from judicial neutrality to cold anger. Mr. Reynolds, did you sign this application? Todd stammered. Larry told me to. He forgot. He told me to handle the paperwork because his eyes were bad. He gave me permission. It was a verbal proxy. I leaned into my microphone. Your Honor, I have 20/20 vision with corrective lenses. I read blueprints for a living, and I would never authorize a $50,000 loan to a man who cannot pay his own cell phone bill. Todd's face turned a blotchy red. He is lying. He is senile. He doesn't remember, Mr. Reynolds. The judge interrupted, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You are under oath. Are you admitting that you signed Mr. Bennett is named to a bank document? Todd looked at his lawyer. Pendergast looked like he wanted to vaporize. Shut up, Todd, Pendergast hissed. Invoke the fifth. But Todd was too panicked to listen. He promised me the house. He said it was ours. I needed the money for investments. He is my father-in-law. It is family money. So you committed forgery, Judge Holloway said. She didn't ask it as a question. She stated it as a fact. Wallace stepped in for the kill. Your Honor, we also have the rejection letter from the bank. They denied the loan because the Social Security number provided didn't match the name on the credit profile.